club, and ended my mother's life as she knew it. Not with anger. Not with tears. With a microphone, a projector screen, and 10 years of evidence. The room was everything she had always wanted. Crystal chandeliers throwing warm gold light across ivory tablecloths. A string quartet playing Vivaldi in the corner. 100 of the wealthiest, most influential people in Virginia seated before her, hanging on her every word. She had just finished a 10-minute speech about her devotion to me. She described the sleepless nights at my hospital bedside. The prayers she sent up in the dark. The moment she begged God to take her instead of me. Women in designer dresses were wiping tears from their eyes. Men were nodding with solemn, quiet respect. My mother had the room completely. Entirely. Like she always had, because Patricia Cooper had spent 50 years learning exactly how to make people feel exactly what she wanted them to feel. And then she looked at me. And she smiled the smile I had been seeing my entire life, warm, proud, victorious. And she said, "Please welcome my beautiful, resilient daughter. Come up here, Meadow. Show everyone what a miracle looks like." The applause was long and warm. I stood up from the head table. I picked up the wooden cane I didn't actually need. I walked to the stage with slow, deliberate steps, fragile, trembling, exactly what she expected. I climbed the 3 carpeted stairs. I reached the podium. She put her arm around my waist and handed me the microphone. Her fingers were warm. Her perfume was Chanel, the same perfume I had smelled in the darkness 3 nights earlier when she crept into my room and pressed my unconscious thumb against a biometric scanner to steal the last of my retirement savings. I took the microphone. I looked out at 100 faces. And then I let go of the cane. It hit the stage floor and rolled toward the velvet curtains with a hollow wooden clatter that echoed across the entire ballroom. I straightened my spine. I rolled my shoulders back. The trembling stopped. The fragile, brain-damaged invalid my mother had been counting on disappeared, and the senior financial auditor, who had been quietly building the case of her life for the past 3 weeks, stood in her place. 1 second of total silence. "My mother just told you I survived a tragedy," I said. My voice carried across every corner of that room. "She is lying." Another beat. "I survived a murder attempt." The applause died so suddenly it was like someone had cut a wire. The string quartet froze mid-note. A woman in the front row dropped her mimosa. A retired judge set down his coffee cup and stared at me with his mouth slightly open. My mother's face went the color of old concrete. And in that moment, in the silence of that ballroom, with 100 witnesses, and a federal wiretap taped to my sternum and security footage loading onto the projection screens behind me, everything she had built came apart. Stay with me. Because what happened in that ballroom was only the ending. The story started 21 days earlier. In a hospital room. Alone. With a phone that had 0 missed calls from my own mother. Drop a comment right now, tell me what state or city you're watching from. I read every single one. It means more than you know. Some details in this story have been changed to protect people involved. But the betrayal, every piece of it is completely real. The first thing I heard was a heart monitor. That rhythmic, mechanical beeping that exists in every hospital in America, designed to be neutral, inoffensive, completely devoid of comfort. The first thing I saw was a ceiling of pale perforated tiles. The first thing I felt was that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong with my own body. My throat felt like cracked parchment. A grinding, bone-deep ache radiated from my kidneys up through my ribcage and into my collarbone. My forearm was threaded with 4 lines. I couldn't feel my feet properly. The fluorescent light above me was too bright and too steady and too indifferent. I didn't know the date. I didn't know how long I had been there. I tried to swallow. My mouth was so dry it felt like the tissue had fused together. A nurse stepped into my field of vision. She paused when she saw my eyes open. She offered a tight, professional smile, the specific kind that nurses develop for patients waking up to empty rooms. Not unkind. Just honest in a way that bypasses words entirely. "Welcome back," she said softly, adjusting something on the four-pole. "You've been unconscious for 21 days. We almost lost you, Meadow." 21 days. The number floated in the sterile air like something I couldn't quite hold. I turned my head slowly and looked at the visitor chair in the corner of the room. No discarded coats draped over the back. No wilted flowers on the windowsill. No empty coffee cups on the side table from someone who had been keeping vigil through the night. Just a pristine vinyl chair that had never once been sat in. "My family," I rasped. The words scraped against my vocal cords like sandpaper. "Are they outside?" The nurse lowered her gaze. She adjusted a valve on my four-pole with the careful, meticulous attention of someone who needs something to do with their hands. "I can try calling them again," she said quietly. "I've left several voicemails over the last few weeks." She didn't have to say anything else. The chair said everything. I pointed at the personal belongings bag on the side table. She handed me my phone. Battery at 3%. I unlocked the screen with a thumb that felt like it belonged to someone else. I was expecting the flood. The missed calls stacked up in a column. The panicked texts demanding updates from doctors. The voicemails from a mother who had been sitting in a waiting room somewhere, trying to understand what was happening to her youngest daughter. 0 missed calls from Patricia Cooper. 1 text from my sister Vanessa, dated the afternoon I was admitted to the ICU. The afternoon my heart had stopped and a medical team had spent 6 minutes with a defibrillator bringing me back. "Stop being dramatic and call me when you're done with this stunt." I locked the screen. The glass felt like ice against my palm. I lay there in that hospital bed and let the full weight of it settle over me. Not grief. Not shock. Something colder and more permanent than either of those. Recognition. I need to tell you who I am before I tell you what they did to me. My name is Meadow Cooper. I'm 33 years old. I'm a senior financial auditor, the kind of person companies hire when they suspect money has been stolen, and they need someone to find it, document it, and make it undeniable in a court of law. I built that career from nothing. No family money. No connections. No safety net. I worked 60-hour weeks for a decade. I drove a 10-year-old car long after I could afford something better because every dollar I earned went into accounts I was building for my future, a future I was constructing entirely by myself because that was the only way it was ever going to get built. My older sister Vanessa was the golden child. She got her college tuition paid. I took out loans. She got a down payment on her house as a gift. I worked overtime. Every resource in our family flowed toward her the way water finds the lowest ground, automatically, without question, as if it were simply the natural order of things. My mother Patricia made those decisions. Patricia Cooper was 71 years old. She was elegant and refined in the specific way that women who have spent decades cultivating a social image become, not naturally graceful but practiced. Deliberately polished. She wore Chanel perfume to everything. She had spent years trying to establish herself in Virginia's elite country club circles, the philanthropic events, the charity committees, the social architecture of a world where appearance was currency. She was devoted to that image above nearly everything else. What I didn't know, what I was about to discover, was just how far above everything else. Including her own daughter's life. I was still lying in that hospital bed, trying to understand why my body felt like it was shutting down from the inside, when the door opened and a man in a tailored navy suit walked in. No white coat. No clipboard. No bedside warmth. He pulled a chair directly to the edge of my mattress, looked me in the eye, and said 4 words that rearranged everything. "We need to talk." Dr. Eris Thorne did not treat illnesses. His badge read toxicology. He described his specialty, without any softening, as the investigation of bodily crime scenes. He had the manner of someone who had long ago decided that false comfort was a form of disrespect to the people sitting across from him. He sat down at the edge of my bed and looked at me directly. "Not about your recovery," he said. "About what we found in your blood." He asked me to think back to the month before I collapsed. Small things, symptoms I might have dismissed. The kind of things that feel like stress or exhaustion or getting older. I closed my eyes. The memories were fragmented by the coma, but a few surfaced with uncomfortable clarity. Coffee that tasted like copper 3 mornings in a row. I had poured it down the sink each time, and blamed a bad filter. Clumps of my dark hair circling the shower drain, I had gathered them in my palm and thought, tax season, long hours, stress, it's fine. The strange slowness in my hands. The way my thoughts had felt slightly clouded for weeks in a way I couldn't quite explain. I had blamed the job. The workload. The relentless grind of a demanding career during the busiest quarter of the year. I told Dr. Thorne all of it. He nodded at each detail with the steady, unsurprised recognition of someone confirming a hypothesis he had already formed. Textbook early-stage indicators, he said. Heavy metal toxicity. Specifically, thallium. The word landed in the room like something with physical weight. Thallium is odorless. Tasteless when dissolved in food or liquid. It was used as rat poison for decades before it was banned, not because it was ineffective, but because it was considered too dangerous for routine use. It does not appear in the human body at these concentrations by accident. The accumulation pattern in your organ tissue is consistent with deliberate, sustained dosing over a period of several weeks. He looked at me without flinching. This was not a health crisis, Meadow. This was an intentional poisoning. 1 hour later, my mother and sister walked through the door. Patricia wore a pristine cream silk blouse. Fresh blowout. Gold wristwatch. She looked like she was arriving at a charity luncheon, and had been briefly inconvenienced by the detour. She did not rush to my side. She stood near the entrance and surveyed the ICU room the way wealthy people survey any space they don't particularly want to be in, with a flat, assessing patience. Vanessa came in behind her with an iced matcha latte in one hand and her phone in the other. Her thumbs were still moving across the screen. When she finally looked up, her eyes swept over my bruised arms and hollow face. Not pity. Not horror. Just a cold, quiet calculation. What's the urgency, doctor? Patricia checked her watch. We had to cancel a very important committee meeting to be here. Meadow is awake now, can she not simply go to a rehabilitation center? Dr. Thorne ignored her. He walked to the wall and dimmed the fluorescent lights. He activated a ceiling-mounted projector. A high-resolution cross-section of a human torso appeared on the blank wall opposite my bed, organs in stark clinical contrast, the damage visible even without medical training. These are your daughter's scans, he said. His voice contained no bedside manner whatsoever. Look at the liver. Look at the kidneys. The tissue is severely compromised. He turned to face my mother fully. The dosage required to cause this level of organ failure is not consistent with an accidental exposure or a contaminated supplement. It is consistent with a deliberate, sustained, targeted poisoning. Someone has been dosing Meadow for weeks. This was not an accident. This was a choice. I watched my mother's face. I watched it very carefully. She did not gasp. She did not press her hands to her mouth. She did not spin toward me with the horrified, burning urgency of a mother who has just been told her child was attacked. The blood drained from her face in a slow, terrible, controlled wave. Her chest began rising and falling in short, shallow bursts. Her foot caught the edge of the doorway strip as she backed away. Her knees gave out. She slid down the corridor wall and hit the floor. I have spent my entire career auditing people who get caught hiding money. I know with complete certainty from years of professional observation, what a person looks like when their deepest secret has just been dragged into the light. My mother was not horrified. My mother was terrified. And those are not the same thing. The detectives arrived 20 minutes later. 2 men in wrinkled suits. Small notepads. The practiced efficiency of people who have run the same intake process hundreds of times. They asked who had a grudge against me. Who stood to gain from my death? I gave them a name, a real threat. Harrison Cole, a vice president at a logistics firm I had audited the previous quarter. I had found a paper trail proving he'd funneled corporate money into offshore accounts to cover gambling debts. My report destroyed his career. The day the audit went public, he had sent me a threatening email. The detectives exchanged a look. The older one wrote the name down in bold letters. Workplace retaliation. Clear motive. Clean, neat narrative. Vanessa saw the opening. She stepped forward and placed a hand over her chest, a gesture so practiced it looked involuntary. Meadow also takes a lot of health supplements, she told them, her voice calibrated to sound like a gently concerned sibling. She's always buying things from those online wellness brands. Detox teas, herbal cleanses, half of them don't even list ingredients. I always told her they were dangerous. Maybe one of those batches was contaminated. The younger detective nodded thoughtfully and made a note. Dr. Thorne crossed his arms. The concentration of thallium in her bloodstream does not come from a contaminated tea bag, he said flatly. This was targeted. Sustained. Deliberate. The older detective offered a polite, dismissive smile. We appreciate the medical perspective, Doctor. We'll pursue both angles. They handed me a business card and left. The door clicked shut. Patricia had managed to get herself off the corridor floor. She sat in the visitor chair, sipping water, her hands still trembling. Her eyes moved to every surface in the room except my face. Vanessa stood by the window checking her phone. The tension in her shoulders had completely dissolved. She looked relaxed. She looked like a woman who had just watched the last obstacle between herself and everything she wanted get quietly moved out of the way. I lay there and understood, with absolute clarity, what had just happened. The police were going to spend the next month chasing a disgraced executive. My family had just been handed a perfect alibi, gift-wrapped, in a hospital room, where I was still breathing through a compromised respiratory system. And the 2 women standing 3 feet away, adjusting their jewelry and checking their emails, were the real culprits. If I waited for the legal system to reach the correct conclusion on its own, I was going to die. I stared at the ceiling tiles. I was a senior financial auditor. I hunted financial criminals for a living. And they had left me alive long enough to come for them. The hospital corridor outside my room stayed quiet for 48 hours. Then the door opened just enough for a tall, exhausted man to slip inside. My sister's husband. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't bring rehearsed sympathy. He brought something that changed everything, a question about a wire transfer that had been quietly eating him alive for 3 days. Marcus was my sister's husband. High school principal. Coached the debate team. Organized the annual food drive. The kind of fundamentally decent man who ends up married to someone genuinely dangerous because she presents a completely different version of herself during the years when it matters. He slipped through my hospital room door on the evening of the 3rd day looking like he had aged a decade since the last time I saw him. The bruised circles under his eyes were deep and dark. His broad shoulders were collapsed forward, as if he were physically carrying weight he hadn't yet figured out how to put down. He pulled the visitor chair close to my bed, and sat with his elbows on his knees, and his head bowed. He was twisting his wedding band around his finger. I had noticed that habit over the years. He did it when Vanessa was lying to him about something significant. He would twist the ring until I thought the skin beneath it would break. Tonight he was twisting it like he wanted it off entirely. "Thank God you're awake," he whispered. They told me it was a waiting game. He looked up. I need to ask you something, Meadow. And I need you to be honest with me even if the answer is hard. I kept my face completely still. Did you give Vanessa money? Right before you got sick? The question hit me like something physical. What kind of money? He swallowed hard. We had a balloon payment due on the house. $150,000. The lender called it in early, we didn't expect it for another year. I was terrified. We don't have that kind of liquidity. I was researching second mortgages, trying to figure out any possible way to keep the house. He looked directly at me. Then 3 days before you went into the hospital, Vanessa told me it was handled. Paid in full. She said it was an early inheritance. That your mother had arranged it as a gift. He leaned forward. The money came from a wire transfer. Sender name masked, just a routing number. No documentation. No note. Nothing. His eyes were searching mine. Did you authorize that, Meadow? Before the coma. The room felt suddenly, drastically colder. $150,000. Nearly half of my liquid savings. Built over a decade of 60-hour weeks, of choosing the 10-year-old car over the new one, of saying no to every vacation and every indulgence and every frivolous purchase because every dollar had a designated purpose, and that purpose was my future. No, Marcus, I said. My voice was quiet and completely steady. I did not give her a single dollar. He stopped twisting the ring. His hands went completely still. Are you certain? Maybe before the coma you set something up and... I am a financial auditor. I track money for a living. I have not authorized a wire transfer in over a year. I know every dollar in every account I own down to the penny. He slumped back in his chair. All the color had left his face. Then where did she get it? She doesn't have access to your accounts. The bank would need documentation, a power of attorney, a notary. And that's when the memory surfaced. 6 weeks before I collapsed. A Sunday afternoon. My kitchen. Vanessa had dropped by unannounced with a thick stack of tax documents she said were for our mother, capital gains paperwork that Patricia had gotten confused and needed help sorting. She brought a stack of pages held together with a binder clip and set it on my kitchen island. I was deep in tax season. Running on 4 hours of sleep. My head was pounding in the specific way it pounds when you've been staring at spreadsheets for 12 hours and your body is quietly staging a rebellion. I leafed through the pages. Checked the numbers where they needed checking. Signed the preparer sections where Vanessa pointed. I didn't read every page. I trusted her. She had buried a durable power of attorney in the middle of that stack, standard size paper, standard formatting, professional looking enough to disappear into 50 pages of legitimate legal documents if the person holding the pen trusts the person handing it to them. I had signed my own financial death warrant. While sitting at my kitchen island. While drinking the very tea they were already poisoning me with. Marcus watched the realization dawn on my face. Meadow. What did she do? She tricked me into signing a power of attorney, I said. The words tasted like ash. And then she waited until I was unconscious and used it to raid my accounts. He shook his head violently. No, that's a felony. The bank requires notarization. They found a notary. Or they paid one. People who are facing catastrophic debt get creative very quickly, when they're desperate. He stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly across the linoleum. He paced the small room with his hands shaking, his face tight, the expression of a fundamentally ethical man trying to process the magnitude of something that exists entirely outside his moral framework. If this is true, the poisoning, the police think it was that corporate guy, but if she needed you unconscious to access the accounts, if she needed you in a coma. He stopped. He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The financial motive was the missing piece that made every other piece fall into place with a terrible, clicking precision. They hadn't poisoned me out of sibling jealousy. They hadn't poisoned me in a fit of rage or resentment. They needed me incapacitated so they could activate the power of attorney without fraud alerts firing to my phone. They needed me in a coma so they could drain the accounts without interruption. And they needed me dead so I could never report the theft. It was a financial strategy. Cold. Calculated. Premeditated. My own family had performed a cost-benefit analysis on my life and decided I was worth more dead than alive. Marcus stopped pacing. He looked at me with profound, devastating sadness. "I am so sorry," he whispered. "I am married to a monster. And I didn't see it. You didn't know. Don't carry her guilt. I need to go home. I need to check her computer. She keeps financial records in a locked folder on her desktop. If there's a copy of that forged document anywhere, I'll find it." "Do not confront her," I said sharply. The pain in my ribs flared, but I ignored it. "If she suspects anything, if she gets even a hint that we know, she will shred the evidence and move every remaining dollar offshore before morning. You have to act completely normal. You know nothing. You are still the man who believes his wife." He nodded slowly. He walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. He didn't look back when he spoke. "I'm going to help you burn her to the ground." The door closed. The room was quiet. The fear that had been living in my chest since I opened my eyes 3 days ago, that cold, helpless terror of someone who has been hurt and doesn't yet understand by whom, was gone. What replaced it was something entirely different. Something focused and clear and absolutely cold. I was alone in this hospital room. I was poisoned. My organs were compromised. My savings had been stolen. My own mother had tried to execute me for a payout. But they had made one critical, fatal miscalculation. They left me alive long enough to figure it out. And they forgot that I hunt financial criminals for a living. Marcus returned the next afternoon with my encrypted laptop in a canvas bag. What I found when I logged into my financial accounts, what had been taken, how precisely it had been timed, and the single email that made me understand the full, unvarnished depth of what they had done. I want to walk you through it piece by piece. Because one of those timestamps is something I will never forget for the rest of my life. Marcus slipped through my door the next afternoon looking exactly like a man who hadn't slept. He set my encrypted laptop on the mattress without ceremony. "I checked her home office this morning. She keeps everything behind biometric passwords on her desktop. I couldn't get in without risking triggering an alert. But I found something else." He reached into the bag and produced a small silver flash drive. She installed smart home cameras years ago when the kids were toddlers. Nanny cams. She controlled the interior system from her phone, and she thought she'd deleted everything before. His voice broke. He composed himself. She didn't know the system automatically mirrored to a secondary cloud backup. "I accessed the archive last night." He held out the drive. "I watched the footage, Meadow. I watched what she did to you." He placed it in my hand and stepped back. "I watched the mother of my children poison her own sister. She was humming. She was standing at the kitchen counter measuring powder into your food containers, and she was humming a song like she was making a weekend casserole." His voice was barely holding together. "I am done. I am choosing my son and my daughter. I cannot raise them in a house built on fraud and attempted homicide." He looked at me steadily. "I will testify. In open court, in front of a judge. I will hand over the digital keys to my wife's prison cell. Tell me what you need me to do next." After he left, I set the flash drive aside and opened the laptop. I bypassed the hospital's public wireless and connected to my encrypted mobile hotspot. I logged into my primary financial dashboard. Checking account, essentially untouched. Smart. Draining the checking account immediately causes bounced automatic payments and instant bank fraud flags. They knew that. I clicked to my brokerage portfolio. The screen loaded. The balance appeared. $0. My breath caught so hard it hurt my ribs. 8 years of disciplined investing. Every skipped vacation. Every deliberately modest decision. Every late night working overtime when I could have been anywhere else. 0. I pulled up the transaction history. The entire portfolio had been liquidated in a single sweeping trade, every position sold simultaneously, proceeds wired out immediately. I found the timestamp. The exact afternoon, I was admitted to the emergency room. I pulled up the authorization log. A scanned document had been uploaded to bypass standard security holds. A durable power of attorney. My signature. Authentic because I had signed it with my own hand at my kitchen island 6 weeks earlier, not knowing what I was signing. The theft didn't stop at the brokerage. I pulled up county property records and entered the address of my Richmond townhouse. Bought as a foreclosure. Renovated with my own hands and my own money. Owned free and clear. My sanctuary. A new deed filing had been recorded 10 days earlier. A home equity line of credit. Amount, $200,000. Primary applicant, Meadow Cooper, via power of attorney. I scrolled to the guarantor section, the secondary signature required for a loan of that magnitude. Patricia Cooper. I sat with that for a long moment. I had been telling myself, needing to tell myself, that my mother was an enabler. A bystander. Someone who had looked away while Vanessa did the terrible thing, too cowardly to participate directly. The black text on the loan document dissolved that story entirely. She was a cosigner. She was a legally bound active participant. They had planned this together from the beginning. I searched my archived email folders for automated bank notifications. Vanessa had deleted the alerts from my primary inbox. She'd had email access through the same power of attorney framework. But she didn't know about the hidden forwarding rules I had established years earlier for tax compliance tracking. I found the hidden folder. A chronological record of every digital move they had made. One email stopped me cold. Subject, wire transfer successful. Timestamp, 4:14 p.m. I reached for my medical chart. I flipped to the ICU logs from my first day. At 4:12 p.m., my kidneys had shut down. My heart had stopped. The medical team had called a code blue. They spent 6 minutes using a defibrillator to bring me back. The wire transfer confirmation had arrived in my inbox at the exact minute doctors were fighting to restart my pulse. They had not simply poisoned me and hoped for the best. They had timed the financial execution to coincide with my medical collapse, so that the fraud alerts, the bank calls, the account activity notifications would all arrive during a window when I was physically unable to receive them. When everyone around me was consumed by the emergency of keeping me alive. It was not impulsive. It was not opportunistic. It was engineered. That evening I sent 2 encrypted messages. To Special Agent David Russo of the FBI, a veteran investigator I had worked with years earlier on a complex money laundering case. We had built a professional trust across that investigation. He knew I didn't call him with guesses. I sent him the loan origination numbers, the wire transfer routing codes, the names. He replied in 2 minutes. One word. Confirmed. To Evelyn Pierce, a civil litigator in Richmond known for freezing hidden assets before opposing counsel finishes their morning coffee. I hired her to prepare full asset freeze injunctions and hold the filing until I gave the precise signal. The trap required exact timing. Move too early, they panic, run, destroy evidence, move money offshore. I needed them comfortable. I needed them to feel invincible. I needed them to believe they had already won. 3 days later I signed myself out of the hospital against medical advice. I taped a micro audio recorder to my sternum. And I did something that every survival instinct I had screamed against. I let my sister take me home. Because the only way to get a verbal confession from people who believe they've already won is to walk directly into their space and give them an audience. Dr. Thorne stared at the discharge form with his jaw set. He told me signing out against medical advice was reckless. Dangerous. Potentially fatal given the state of my kidneys. I picked up the pen. Staying in this room makes me a sitting target, I said. The real culprits are walking through the front doors during visiting hours while the detectives chase a corporate executive. If I wait for the system to reach the right conclusion on its own, I stay a victim. He watched me sign. He didn't agree with my choice. But he recognized something in my face that made arguing feel pointless. He prescribed binding agents for the remaining thallium in my system, and told me to call him the second I felt dizzy. Before I left, Evelyn had arranged a discreet delivery through my civil attorney disguised as a pharmacy prescription drop-off. Inside the small brown paper bag, a micro audio recorder. No larger than a thumb drive. High-sensitivity microphone engineered to capture whispered conversation across a crowded room. I pressed it flat against my sternum beneath my collarbone and secured it with medical tape. I buttoned my high-neck pajama top over it. I smoothed the fabric. I was no longer a recovering patient. I was a walking federal wiretap. When Patricia and Vanessa came to collect me, they performed the devoted caretakers with the polished ease of women who had been performing devotion their entire lives. Patricia signed my discharge papers. Vanessa gathered my belongings with exaggerated, careful attention, tucking things into the hospital bag like she was packing for a beloved child. "You'll stay in our guest room until you're strong enough to be on your own," Vanessa said warmly. "We have everything set up. You're going to be so comfortable." I let my eyes drift slightly. Let my voice go thick and slow. "Thank you," I murmured. "I'm just so tired. Everything feels fuzzy." Patricia exhaled. The relief that moved across her face was deep and genuine and completely revealing. She glanced at Vanessa. One quick, shared look that carried everything: confirmation, satisfaction, the quiet triumph of two people who have just been told the thing they were most afraid of is no longer a threat. They thought the thallium had eroded my neurological function. They thought the brain damage had done their work for them. They were bringing a helpless patient into their home to monitor and contain. They had no idea they were letting a predator into their living room. The guest bedroom at Vanessa's house was decorated in oppressive pastels, mint green and dusty pink, floral wallpaper on every wall, the aesthetic of a room designed to look like a sanctuary and feel like a holding cell. The air was thick with synthetic vanilla room spray. That first night, Vanessa pressed 2 white pills and a glass of water into my hands with a warm, nurturing smile. "The doctor said these will help you sleep through the night and give your body time to heal." I took the pills with a trembling hand. Placed them in my mouth. Took a long swallow of water. Waited until the door clicked shut. Spat them into a tissue. Poured the glass of water into the potted fern by the window. Lay down. And waited. At exactly 2 a.m., the door handle turned. Slow. Deliberately slow, the pace of someone who wants to make no sound at all. Then the smell. Heavy floral. Rich amber. Dense and unmistakable. Chanel. My mother's perfume. The one she wore to my elementary school performances when I was 6 years old. The one she wore to every charity dinner and Sunday brunch and family holiday for as long as I could remember. The one she was now wearing as she crept into my bedroom in the middle of the night to steal the last of my retirement savings. She stopped beside my bed. I could hear the faint rustle of her silk pajamas. I could hear her breathing, shallow, controlled, focused. She stood there for a long time simply watching me. The psychological weight of it was almost unbearable. This was the woman who gave birth to me. The woman who was supposed to be the thing standing between me and the dangers of the world. Instead, she had become the danger. The mattress dipped as she leaned over. A cold, smooth object hovered near my hip. A tablet. She reached out, and her fingers wrapped around my right wrist. Her skin was freezing. Every nerve in my body fired simultaneously. Every biological instinct demanded that I pull away, sit up, scream, fight. The impulse to defend myself was so strong it was almost physically painful to suppress. I allowed my arm to remain completely limp. Dead weight. She lifted my hand with clinical detachment, no hesitation, no trembling, no guilt in any of her movements. She isolated my right thumb. I felt the cold, smooth glass of a biometric scanner press against the pad. A faint green glow illuminated the darkness behind my closed eyelids. A tiny vibration confirmed the scan. She held my thumb to the glass for exactly 3 seconds. Then she simply let my arm drop. My wrist hit the mattress with a soft, hollow thud. She turned. Walked back to the door. Didn't look back. The door clicked shut. I opened my eyes in the dark and stared at the ceiling. A single tear rolled from the corner of my eye and disappeared into my hairline. Not fear. Not grief, exactly. It was the feeling of a final illusion dying, the last trace of a story I had been telling myself my whole life finally burning away, and leaving only the clean, cold truth behind. My mother was not weak. She was not passive. She was not a bystander who had looked away. She was a predator who had just pressed my living thumb against a scanner to steal my retirement savings while I pretended to sleep. I reached under my pillow for the burner phone Marcus had left me. I typed a message to Evelyn Pierce. Offshore account compromised. Prepare everything for immediate filing on my signal. I turned the phone off. I lay in the dark and let the plan settle into its final shape. The timeline had accelerated. But the trap was locked. And the most important part was still ahead. 2 nights later, Vanessa brought a steaming ceramic mug into the guest room. The earthy scent of her exclusive detox tea blend filled the air. I made this specially for you, she said, her voice a warm, melodic purr. Your doctor said your kidneys need help flushing out the remaining toxins. This tea is packed with antioxidants. It will help you heal. The sociopathic irony of those words settled over me like ice water. She was using the language of wellness and healing to deliver the exact chemical that had already shut my organs down once. I reached for the mug with trembling hands. Pulled it close to my chest, directly over the hidden microphone. The recorder needed to capture every nuance of what was about to happen. I brought the rim to my lower lip. Allowed a single fraction of a drop to touch my skin. And immediately launched into a deep, racking, convincing cough. The spasm shook my whole body. I gasped for air, letting my neck muscles strain with the effort of it. Vanessa, my chest is tight, my inhaler, I think it's in my coat downstairs in the hallway closet. Annoyance flashed across her carefully composed face. She hated being treated like an errand girl. But she needed me calm and cooperative enough to drink the tea. Hold the cup steady. I'll be right back. Don't spill it on the duvet. She turned and walked out. I had 40 seconds. I shoved the blanket aside. Grabbed the empty medical specimen bag I had smuggled from the hospital. Unscrewed the cap. Tilted the mug. The dark, scalding liquid cascaded into the bag. I sealed it. Shoved it under my thigh beneath the mattress pad. Brought the empty mug back to my chest. When Vanessa returned holding an inhaler, she paused, staring at the empty cup. I wiped my mouth slowly with my sleeve. So thirsty, I slurred, letting my eyelids droop heavily. The warm liquid helped my throat. Thank you. She took the empty mug. And a brilliant, triumphant smile spread across her face. She pulled the wooden chair to the edge of my bed and sat down. She wasn't leaving. She wanted to watch. People who believe they have already won stop being careful with what they say. She held a crystal goblet of white wine. The ice chimed softly as she swirled it. She watched me with the lazy, satisfied stillness of a predator that has already made the kill. Are you still awake, Meadow? I let my head loll to one side. Groaned softly. You look terrible, she said pleasantly. You always worked too hard. 60-hour weeks. Building that big beautiful savings account. And for what? You don't have a husband. You don't have children. You just hoarded money in that boring Richmond townhouse like it was going to love you back. She took a long sip. I did everything right. I married a good man. I had the perfect children. I maintained the perfect image. And I was still drowning. Credit cards maxed. Marcus talking about downsizing. Do you have any idea how humiliating that would have been? People like us don't downsize. She leaned closer. But you made it so easy. You always thought you were the smart sister. The financial wizard. And you didn't even read the paperwork I put in front of you. You just signed on the line. A durable power of attorney, right there on your kitchen island, while you drank the tea I made you. She set the empty goblet down. We took the money, Meadow. All of it. The stocks, the home equity. It's gone. You won't need it anymore anyway. I let out a soft, confused whimper. Why? I slurred. She leaned until her face was inches from mine. Because Mom told me to, she whispered. And then with the loosened tongue of a woman, who believes her last witness is dying, the real story came out. Everyone thinks Patricia Cooper is a saint, Vanessa said, and the resentment beneath those words was years deep. This refined matriarch. This devoted mother. She's a fraud. She lost her inheritance years ago. She's been covering up catastrophic gambling debts for a decade. Offshore betting syndicates. Private poker rooms. People were threatening to expose her, ruin her reputation, take her house. She stood and paced the short length of the room. She came to me crying. She said she needed $500,000 or she was finished. She knew you had the assets. She also knew you would never give her a single dollar voluntarily. You always judged us for our spending. So Mom researched the poison. She read about thallium online. She ordered it from an overseas vendor using a prepaid debit card. She stopped pacing. But she couldn't do the dirty work herself. She is too cowardly for that. She has always been too cowardly for the dirty work. She made me do it. She told me if I mixed it into your meal prep containers, we'd split the payout. She said you'd slip into a coma and pass away quietly. We'd clear my mortgage and pay off her bookies. A clean slate for both of us. She looked down at me. The tea is working faster than I expected. You're already fading. She smoothed her silk lounge set. Walked to the door. Sleep well, Meadow. You were a good auditor. But you were a terrible sister. The lock engaged. I waited 10 minutes in complete silence. Then I reached under my collar. Peeled the audio recorder from my sternum. The tiny red indicator light blinked steadily in the dark. I pressed stop. The light went dark. I held the device in my palm and felt the specific satisfaction of a case that is finally, completely, irrevocably closed. I had the bank records. The forged loan documents. The security footage of Vanessa measuring thallium into my food while she hummed. The physical tea sample sealed in the specimen bag. And a crystal-clear audio confession detailing the entire conspiracy from beginning to end. My mother had researched the poison. My mother had ordered the weapon. My mother had been too cowardly to use it herself, so she had leveraged her golden child's desperation to do it for her and promised to split the proceeds once I was dead. Now I just needed the right stage. And my mother had already built it for me. 4 days later I walked into the Oak Ridge Country Club leaning on a cane I didn't need, wearing foundation 2 shades too pale, shoulders deliberately rounded forward. In my leather bag was a sealed manila envelope containing printed bank records and loan documents. Taped to my chest was the audio recorder. And I had given the AV technician $20 and very specific instructions about what to play and when. The ballroom was everything my mother had ever wanted. Crystal chandeliers throwing warm golden light across ivory tablecloths. A string quartet playing Vivaldi. The air smelling of catered salmon and expensive floral arrangements. 100 of Virginia's most prominent citizens, real estate developers, country club board members, retired judges, philanthropists, seated and attentive and entirely in her hands. She stood at the center of it all wearing a tailored emerald silk dress. The Cartier bracelets, purchased with the equity of my home, clicked against each other on her wrist as she gestured to her admirers. She had finally purchased the social crown she had always wanted. With my money. Vanessa stood nearby in a white pantsuit, accepting praise from 2 board members who called her an angel on earth. She placed a modest hand over her heart. "Family always comes first," she said. I stood near the coat check and let my shoulders droop forward. Let my hand tremble against the cane handle. When Patricia spotted me, she rushed across the ballroom with a manufactured joy so convincing I almost admired it. "Meadow, sweetheart, you made it." She pulled me into a suffocating embrace. I stood inside it completely rigid, breathing the Chanel, the same perfume I had smelled in the dark when she lifted my unconscious hand. "I'm just glad to be here, Mom," I whispered. For the next hour I was paraded through the room like a beloved, fragile artifact. Guests approached with tilted heads and soft, pitying voices. I accepted their sympathy with quiet nods. I played the grateful survivor without letting a single flicker of what I actually felt cross my face. When the formal program began, Patricia climbed the stage steps and gripped the acrylic podium. She lowered her head. A single rehearsed tear traced down her cheek. "I stood by her hospital bed for 3 weeks," she told the crowd, her voice trembling with practiced, perfect emotion. "I watched the monitors. I prayed. I begged the universe to take me instead. A mother should never have to bury her youngest child. Family is the only thing that matters. We survived this nightmare because we held on to each other." The room sighed collectively. Women reached for their napkins. Men nodded with grave, respectful solemnity. She had them completely. She lifted her gaze and found me at the head table. "Please welcome my beautiful, resilient daughter. Come up here, Meadow. Show everyone what a miracle looks like." The applause was warm and long. I pushed back from the table. I walked to the stage steps with slow, deliberate care. Climbed them one at a time. Reached the podium. She put her arm around my waist. Handed me the microphone. Her fingers brushed mine. I took it. I looked out at 100 faces. And I let go of the cane. The hollow wooden clatter as it hit the stage and rolled toward the velvet curtains echoed across the entire ballroom. I straightened my spine. I rolled my shoulders back. Every trace of the fragile patient disappeared. "My mother just told you I survived a tragedy." Complete silence. "She is lying." A beat. "I survived a murder attempt." The applause stopped as if it had never existed. The string quartet froze. A woman in the front row dropped her glass. Patricia let out a nervous, breathless laugh. "Meadow, sweetheart, the toxins are still affecting your thinking." She reached for the microphone. "Do not touch me." The sharpness in my voice made her physically recoil. I looked toward the back of the room and gave the AV technician the signal. The projection screens flanking the stage flickered to life, the slideshow of family memories vanished. A stark legal document replaced it, the forged power of attorney, my signature displayed in high resolution for 100 people to read. While I was in a coma fighting for my life, my mother and sister did not sit at my bedside. They were at a bank. That document bears a fraudulent signature. They used it to liquidate my entire stock portfolio and extract $200,000 against my home. The screens transitioned. Wire transfer records. Red numbers. $300,000 extracted across 3 weeks. You are eating catered salmon and drinking mimosas paid for with my stolen life savings. This entire event is a fraud funded by a felony. Murmurs erupted through the ballroom. Vanessa lunged from the front row. She's having a breakdown, someone get a doctor. I gave the technician the second signal. The high-definition security footage from Vanessa's kitchen began to play on both screens. The ballroom went completely, absolutely silent. There was Vanessa, standing at her marble kitchen island in expensive athletic wear, reaching into an opaque tea tin, measuring a fine grayish powder with careful precision into glass food containers, stirring it in with methodical, practiced strokes. Humming. She was humming. The timestamp burned in the corner in bright red numbers. That is my sister. The powder she is mixing into my food containers is thallium, a heavy metal poison that nearly destroyed my liver and kidneys. She fed it to me over the course of several weeks. She caused my organ failure deliberately, so I would be incapacitated long enough for them to drain everything I own. A woman near the center of the room pressed her hands to her mouth. Several men stood from their chairs. A retired judge near the front was absolutely still, staring at the screen with the expression of someone watching something they know they will never be able to unsee. Vanessa had frozen completely. She was staring at the projection, watching herself commit the crime in high definition, and her mouth was open and nothing was coming out. But Vanessa was not the architect, I said. I turned and pointed directly at my mother. Patricia was gripping the acrylic podium with both hands. The knuckles above her Cartier bracelets had gone completely white. The plot originated with the woman standing next to me. My mother has spent decades cultivating an image of wealth and refinement in this room, in this club, among these people. The truth is that she lost her inheritance years ago. She has been covering up catastrophic illegal gambling debts for a decade. Offshore syndicates. Private poker rooms. People were threatening to expose her and destroy the social standing that she values above everything else in her life. Including her daughters. Including human life. The silence in the ballroom was so complete, I could hear the ice melting in the glasses. She couldn't get my money voluntarily. She knew I would never give it to her. So she researched the poison, ordered it from an untraceable overseas vendor, and leveraged her golden child's desperation to execute the plan, promising to split the proceeds once I was dead. I reached into my blouse and removed the micro audio recorder. I held it up. I wore a federal wiretap throughout my recovery at Vanessa's house. The confession I recorded is already in the possession of the FBI. The evidence on these screens was transmitted to federal investigators yesterday morning. Patricia lunged. Her manicured nails raked across the back of my hand as she grabbed for the recorder. I stepped aside. She stumbled forward and crashed into the metal microphone stand. It toppled from the stage and hit the floor with a crash that rang through every corner of the ballroom. The heavy oak doors at the back of the room swung open. Federal agents in dark jackets moved down the center aisle with quiet, coordinated authority. Dr. Thorne walked beside the lead investigator. He found me on the stage and gave one confirming nod. Special Agent David Russo approached the stage. 2 state troopers surrounded Vanessa before she could take a step toward the exit. Vanessa Cooper. You are under arrest for attempted murder and wire fraud. No, you don't understand, my mother made me. The handcuffs closed. A detective held up a clear evidence bag containing the detox tea tin, recovered that morning from Vanessa's kitchen during the execution of a simultaneous search warrant. The physical container of the murder weapon, logged into federal chain of custody. Vanessa stared at it and understood. The video wasn't the only proof. They had the weapon. Agent Russo looked up at me. Miss Cooper. We received everything. The audio and the security footage provide sufficient probable cause. I reached into my leather bag and produced a thick, bound folder. This will make the prosecution more complete, I said, handing it down to him. 200 pages of audited spreadsheets tracing a decade of my mother's illegal offshore gambling operations. Routing numbers. Cross-reference tax returns proving intentional federal evasion. She didn't just forge my signature. She defrauded the federal government for 10 years to cover her private debts. Agent Russo opened the cover. Examined the first page. You always do excellent work, Miss Cooper. He turned to my mother. Patricia Cooper. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, and tax evasion. Patricia tried to stand. Her legs refused. She gripped the podium and hauled herself upright, chest heaving, expensive makeup ruined. Meadow. Her voice had collapsed into something small and broken. Please. I am your mother. I gave you life. I looked at her steadily. You tried to take it away, I said. 2 agents took her by the arms. The handcuffs closed directly over her Cartier bracelets. The jewelry purchased with my stolen savings now sat pinned beneath the unforgiving steel of federal law enforcement. She was not leaving the Oak Ridge Country Club as a triumphant matriarch. She was leaving as a federal prisoner. In front of every person whose approval she had sacrificed me to earn. The federal justice system moves without sentiment. 2 days after the arrests, they were led into the courthouse in orange jumpsuits and transport chains. The women who had worn Cartier bracelets and tailored silk to a country club brunch 3 days earlier now shuffled in matching government-issued clothing under fluorescent lights that had no interest in being kind to anyone. Bond denied. Remanded to county detention. As the marshals took them back to the holding cells, Vanessa cast a desperate, searching look across the courtroom. Looking for Marcus. The wooden benches were empty. He wasn't there. Evelyn Pierce coordinated with Agent Russo to address the financial wreckage. The bank voided the fraudulent home equity line within 48 hours of reviewing the FBI incident report. The lien against my townhouse was dissolved. My property title came back clean. The brokerage portfolio took longer. The funds had been routed into an offshore shell account linked to my mother's gambling networks. But with my encrypted tracking data in federal hands, the overseas accounts were frozen and seized within weeks. My savings returned to their rightful place, digit by digit, account by account. Marcus and I met for coffee a month later, at a quiet cafe far from the neighborhoods either of us used to live in. He looked like a completely different man. The suffocating weight of a marriage built on deception had finally come off his shoulders, and the difference was visible in his posture, his face, the steadiness of his hands when he wrapped them around his coffee cup. The family court judge had granted an expedited divorce. Because Vanessa was incarcerated on felony charges involving the premeditated poisoning of a family member, custody proceedings moved with unprecedented speed. Marcus received sole legal and physical custody of their children. A permanent restraining order prevented Vanessa from contacting them. They're enrolled in a new school district, he told me, his voice quieter and more grounded than I had ever heard it. Big backyard. A golden retriever. They're safe, Meadow. They're finally free from her. He placed Vanessa's house keys on the table between us. The federal authorities seized the mortgage payment she made with your money. Without those funds, the balloon payment defaulted. The bank initiated foreclosure yesterday. I finished packing last night. I never want to set foot inside those walls again. He stared at the keys for a moment. She traded her sister, her husband, and her children to keep that house. And now it belongs to a corporate holding company. We finished our coffee in a long, easy silence. When he stood to leave, he hugged me once, the embrace of 2 people who survived the same storm from opposite sides of it. Then he walked into the sunlight, back to his children. The federal trial concluded 3 weeks ago. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. During sentencing, I delivered my victim impact statement from a wooden podium in the federal courtroom. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I looked directly at the two women in orange jumpsuits and told the judge everything: the years of manipulation, the weaponized language of family, the physical agony of organ failure, the night my mother pressed my thumb to a biometric scanner while I pretended to sleep. I told the court that Patricia and Vanessa Cooper had never shown a single ounce of mercy toward me. And they did not deserve it in return. The judge agreed. Neither of them will see the outside of a federal penitentiary for a very long time. Patricia, who wore Cartier bracelets purchased with my stolen savings and craved the validation of Virginia's social elite above all else, is now assigned to the prison laundry detail. She spends her days folding coarse generic uniforms alongside the very people she spent decades looking down upon. Vanessa, the golden child who believed she was entitled to my labor and my life, is working the sanitation shift, scrubbing concrete floors for pennies an hour. The lavish life they tried to murder me to protect is gone. I sold the Richmond townhouse. Too many ghosts. The kitchen island where I had unknowingly signed the forged document. The walls that held the memory of poisoned food containers arriving with a warm, sisterly smile. I used a portion of my restored savings to buy property in the Shenandoah Valley. My home now sits at the end of a gravel driveway surrounded by acres of dense old forest. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking rolling mountains. No homeowner association. No social obligations. Just wind through the pine trees and a silence so complete I can hear my own thoughts again. I left my corporate auditing career. I opened a boutique consulting firm specializing in forensic accounting for victims of domestic financial abuse. I help people untangle the fraud woven by their own families. I use everything I know to arm the people who need it most. And then there was one final move. Evelyn notified me, shortly after the trial, that the Oak Ridge Country Club was facing a severe liquidity crisis. Poor investments. Declining memberships. A commercial mortgage in deep distress. The holding company was quietly seeking a buyer. I instructed Evelyn to form a blind anonymous LLC. I purchased the mortgage in its entirety. I now own the financial fate of the exact ballroom, where I dropped the cane, and dismantled my family in front of every person they had ever tried to impress. The wealthy socialites who sipped mimosas, and watched my mother perform her devotion, are unknowingly writing their monthly membership checks to me. I hold the power to foreclose at any time I choose. But for now I simply hold the debt. Quietly. Invisibly. Completely. Because real power doesn't require an audience. Real power is the absolute freedom to shape your own reality on your own terms, in your own time, without asking anyone's permission. It's a Tuesday evening. The sun is going down behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, casting long purple shadows across the valley outside my window. I'm standing in my kitchen. The countertops are clean. The air smells of cedar and the Earl Grey steeping in my mug. I walk to the front door and turn the heavy brass deadbolt. It engages with a solid, satisfying click. I am safe. I spent 33 years believing that the word family was a contract. I had been born into one that required me to absorb whatever came with it. That being a good daughter meant staying quiet, working hard, and providing a safety net that got torn apart every time I finished repairing it. I was wrong. Blood is a biological coincidence. It does not grant anyone a free pass to steal your peace, your wealth, or your life. The people who truly belong in your world are the ones who respect the boundaries you draw around it. And if the time ever comes to audit your own life, to look clearly and honestly at the ledger of what you give,